So remember, we've been talking about rational numbers. When I say rational, you think? I know it's been a while. What word do you think when I say rational? A rational number is any number that can be written as a fraction. So when I say rational, you think fractions. And of course, along with fractions, they can be changed to decimals, but we're going to focus on fractions. So we talked about what they were. We talked about how to put them on a number line. We talked about how to order them in a list, least to greatest or greatest to least. And we talked about how to compare to whether one was bigger or smaller than the other. Really, what we're doing for the rest is a lot of what we did in the first unit. We're going to be adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, but this time the fractions could be positive or negative. Okay? Whereas in the first unit, everything was always positive. Well, don't let that throw you. You still do it the same way. You just got to be careful about the negative and positive numbers. So remember, when we add or subtract fractions, we have to find common denominators. And then we add or subtract them, and then we reduce if we can. Okay? Well, first of all, we've got negative 5/8 plus negative 7/2. I'm thinking I want to change that. Adding a negative is the same as what? When we add a negative, that's the same as what operation? Yeah, it's the same as subtracting. So this is the same. I want to write it without the parentheses. Negative 5/8 minus 7/2. So I just made it a little simpler. Now I want to do my common denominators like I would do with any normal fraction addition subtraction question. So what's my common denominator? 8. So I don't have to change the first one. Remember, it's still, don't forget that negative. A lot of students, they forget to write the negatives. Minus, I have to change the second fraction. 7/2 becomes what over 8? Well, times 4. 7 times 4 gives me 28. And now we're ready to actually do it. And be careful. What is negative 5 subtract 28? Negative 5 subtract 28. And if you need to use a calculator, use one.
Is it -5 or is it a minus and just negative?
Oh, it's negative 5 minus 28. Say it. Negative 33, and denominator stays the same. We can't reduce it. So we're done. So you've got to watch those positives and negatives. That's sort of the trickiest part of these ones. This one, we don't really have to worry about any parentheses. We can just go straight into common denominators. What would be the lowest common denominator? 4 and 6? 12. Remember, there's a negative in front here. Don't forget that negative. One over 4, well, I times 3 to get what? 3 over 12, and then don't forget that negative in front. This one times 2, so I got to do 13 times 2, which gives me 26. Now I
Again, watch those negatives.
And by the way, when you see something like this, negative, like that, where the negative is sort of halfway in the fraction, this means the same as this. You can put the negative up top. That means the same. Okay? Yeah, you can put it in the bottom if you want, but we don't want to work with negatives in the denominator. We want to keep them positive because then it's easier to work with, especially if we're finding lowest common denominator. But you still can.
So what's negative 3 plus 26?
23
12. And I can't reduce that.
So we're done. Okay.
Try the next one on your own or with a partner.
Okay.
Negative in front there. What's the lowest common denominator? 6. So the first one becomes 20, and don't forget there's a negative in front. Second doesn't change. Negative 20 plus 17. Negative 3 over 6.
That's right.
This can be reduced. I can divide the top and bottom by 3. But don't forget there's still a negative there. So if I divide the top and bottom by 3, to reduce it,
I got negative 1 now. Okay. All right, this is kind of a similar one, but it's good practice.
common denominators. Hello?
Oh, wait. On top, there's one on.
Oh, sorry, I'm doing it wrong. Thank you. Common denominators, yes or 6? Don't have to change the first one, but the second one becomes
8 over 6.
8 over 6. And what does it become when I subtract?
53, 6.
Careful.
No.
Negative 3 over 6, which was the answer we got on the first page.
Would be.
Yes, and you get negative 1 over 2.
What do you want to do with this second one first? What might make life easier on you? Sienna?
Make this plus. So change it to negative 5 over 4 plus 16 over 5.
And then you don't need the parentheses.
Common denominator, smallest number that 4 and 5 go into, 20. Remember that first one has got a negative in front. So 5 over 4 is the same as what over 20? Times 5, 25 for this one.
25, because you got to times the bottom and top by 5.
This one you times 4, so 5 times 4 is 20, 16 times 4. Again, use a calculator if you need it. 64 is correct. Add the two together.
Watch out, one of them's negative. Negative 25 plus 64. Again, that's where you want to use the calculator. Sure.
Is it 8?
It's not 89
30.
because one of them's negative and one of them's positive. So we actually have to subtract 2 times 39. over 20. Okay. This is going to be negative. Yes, yes. So this is always going to be negative every step. It would be positive. Yes. Okay, this one we had to change both, or no, sorry. Just one, 8 and 8, so we don't have to change the second one. 5 over 2 becomes what over 8? 20. And 20 subtract 39, negative 9. So again, the rules for adding and subtracting rational numbers, positive and negatives, are exactly the same. You got to do common denominators. But you just got to watch out which ones are positive, which ones are negative. Because if you forget a negative, it's going to give you a completely different answer. Like, for example, it's very common that students would do this. They'd see this, and then their next step, they'd forget to put the negative. And then they get 69 over 20, which of course is the incorrect answer. So you've got to watch those, especially the negatives. Okay. Yeah. No, because there's more positives. Because you got 64 positives and 25 negatives. There's more positives, aren't there?
Yeah.
So therefore the answer must be positive. Yes. Okay. Here's where we're gonna use maybe just some regular numbers, some integers, or some decimals. The trickiest part of these questions is setting up the operation. So you've got to think about it. So at the beginning of June, the Frosty Snowblower Company had $235.46 in debt. Is that positive or negative?
Negative.
Pardon me. Yeah. It increased its debt by 156.71. Positive or negative?
Positive.
But it's increasing its debt, right? So isn't it going deeper into debt? So it would also be negative. So to calculate how much money they are in debt, we would have to go negative 235.46, add negative 156.71. You're taking the initial debt they had, negative 235.46. You're adding the further debt, 156.71, to calculate the total debt, which obviously must be a negative number. Remember, this just becomes minus. So what you would do on your calculator is negative 235.46 minus 156.71. Okay. Anybody got an answer there? Anybody? That use their calculator? We don't have any calculators? Santa's working on it? I think you added.
Is it the random magnitude?
Almost. You missed something at the beginning.
Oh, negative.
Negative 392.17.
And don't forget the dollar sign. Again, you gotta watch those negatives. Okay. This is an interesting one. We've got a diagram. I gotta draw a little diagram. Best I can draw for now. So he's on a cliff, 14.7 meters above sea level. Sea level is where water is. Okay? So he jumps, dives in, and goes 3.8 meters below sea level. Below sea level actually means minus, right? Or negative 3.8. So you guys would probably be able to tell what's the total, how would you find the total distance he dove?
What you like out.
Yeah, you would just add the two, right? 14.7 plus 3.8. And that gives you 18.5 meters. Another way to look at it, and this is why we can add it. Let's say that we call below sea level negative. To find the difference, what operation does difference mean? When you're finding the difference between two numbers.
Don't you have to like, wait, you
Subtract, correct. So what I would have to do is I would have to subtract 14.7, subtract negative 3.8, but notice what happens. It works out to the same as this. So these are the same. So you don't have to do this. You can just do the addition, add the two amounts, the two distances. But it is a bit of a tricky question. You got to be a little careful with it. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, no, that one.
Okay. Sorry. Okay.